All right, we have not had an Understanding the Times study in quite a while. I looked back, and the last time was actually March of last year. We shut down for a couple months, the middle of March to the middle of May, and right before that, I guess it was, we did the book, The Blood of Jesus. I don't know if anybody remembers that. Yeah, it's a great book. Afterwards, a few people asked me, they expected me to say something was wrong with the book, because normally I Understand the Times is pointing out something that's wrong, and this wasn't. An excellent book. And that was last March, was the last time we had an Understanding the Times. We usually were doing them every couple months or so, but I haven't done that in quite a while now. But things are going on, and need to be aware of one particular thing we're going to look at tonight, called the Equality Act. One of the other Understanding the Times we did is about a year and a half ago, May or June of 2019, was on this book here called The Woke Church. I don't know if everybody remembers that study. And back then, being woke was just kind of a new thing. I'd never really heard of the word before in terms of the way they're using it. And now it's everywhere. If you're not woke, then you're out of it. You're anti everything that's bad biblically, and you're just condemned by the culture and the media and people like that in the world that surrounds us. And I mentioned this guy here was in favor of that woke church. He's a graduate of Dallas Seminary. Eric Macy pastored, I think it was in Philadelphia, as I recall, and he was advocating for the church to wake up. An urgent call for Christians in America to confront racism and injustice is the subtitle of the book. And I mentioned in studying that book that a lot of people who might hear or watch that presentation on the woke church will view me as a racist because I'm not going along with that. In the same way, probably those of us, not us, I'm sure we'll agree on what we'll be talking about tonight, but others will view us as homophobes and whatever terms that come up like that because of our position on this, the Equality Act, so-called. Before I get into that, I came across this. Oral Roberts University is a college in Tulsa, Oklahoma, started, of course, by Oral Roberts back in the 1950s or 60s. I forgot when it started. But they had a basketball team that made it into the NCAA tournament, which is unusual because it's not a very big school. It's just a small, Christian school. They won their first game, then they won their second game. And everybody watching those basketball tournaments, loves that kind of thing. Some team out of nowhere, some small school that beats some big schools and upsets them, and they kind of call it the Cinderella story. This article, though, Oral Roberts University isn't the feel-good March Madness story that we need, was in USA Today a few days ago, I think March 21st, if I remember, if I can see that. March 23rd, so yesterday I guess it was. No, Tuesday or something like that. Okay, the 23rd. And this person writing it, her name's down there, Himal Javeri, I guess I pronounce it, was saying that Oral Roberts University, because they are against homosexual marriage and things like that, that they should not even be allowed in the basketball tournament. It says right down there, the fact is, any and all anti-LGBTQ language in any school's policies should ban them from NCAA competition. So not even in the tournament, this particular tournament that they worked their way in to get to, but they shouldn't be allowed to even have a basketball team or a wrestling team or a swim team, whatever. Ban them from NCAA competition because they have their standards are according to the Bible instead of according to the prevailing culture. In fact, must have been in a previous paragraph, I just cut out a little bit of it, but she said that their position is anti what our culture today approves of, which is true. I mean, if you're a Christian, you're going to be against the culture, what the culture approves of. But according to this particular lady, I'm not sure how popular this position is, but they should be in evidently all Christian schools, and I would assume even Christian individuals ultimately should be banned from participating in NCAA sports if they hold those Christian and biblical viewpoints. So that's not the Equality Act, but that's where this whole thing is going towards, that even private Christian schools are being attacked and told that they should not be allowed to participate in certain things that they have done forever. The Equality Act, destructive means to an immoral end. The means that they're using with this Equality Act are destructive to individuals, destructive to the church, destructive to Christians, destructive to society. The immoral end is to just approve of things that God says are wrong. Calling evil good and good evil is the essence of the Equality Act. And if that's the goal, then that's immoral and wrong and very damaging to our society. So that's what we're going to be looking at for the next, I think 3 or 4 hours it'll take us to go through 4 pages. No, this go quick actually. Okay, a summary of the Equality Act. What is the Equality Act? Has anybody heard of this, by the way? Just in the news or whatever. Okay, yeah, it's been around for a long time. I didn't realize that. I thought it was just something new this year, but it's been around for a long time. This here is the official summary of it. This is not made by me or by some anti-Equality Act group. It's by, I can't see at the bottom of the page, the Congressional Research Service. So it's the organization that's employed by Congress to summarize what bills stand for, what they are supposed to accomplish. And the bill itself is, of course, a couple hundred pages long, but this, couple paragraph summary tells us what it is. And again, if you just look at the first 4 words, say, okay, that's fine. The bill prohibits discrimination. If that's all it was, we could probably all go along with that. But it's a lot more than that. It's based on sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity in areas including public accommodations and et cetera. We'll look at some of the important parts of this in just a moment, but or during our time tonight, but that's the essence of the bill, prohibiting discrimination based on gender identity, not just gender. The first word, sex, would be gender, but as well orientation and gender identity. It is designed to amend the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That bill was proposed during the Kennedy administration when he was assassinated, then got impetus. There's a lot of opposition from it back in the 60s, early 60s. With the assassination of President Kennedy, there was the lessening of opposition, and the bill got passed under President Johnson the following year. But the Civil Rights Act was designed, of course, to equal out things based on race. No separate eating facilities and drinking fountains, things such as that. But to attach the Equality Act to the Civil Rights Act is a false connection. They are not the same kind of thing. The Civil Rights Act protected people mostly based on race, or some gender issues in it as well. They also included religion, national origin, and they probably included those to kind of soften the opposition. The Civil Rights Act, all we ever think about when we hear of the Civil Rights Act is the racial component of that. But other things were a part of it, very minor way, and probably just to get more people to support, more politicians especially to support it. But just looking at those matters, race, gender, religion, national origin, that's how it was defined. 3 of those 4 issues are by birth and not by choice. You're born a certain race, you're born a certain gender, you're born in a certain country. It's not what you choose to become, it's what you are by birth. And that's what the Civil Rights Act was going against. Why should you discriminate against somebody for something that they can't help? It's what they were born, the color of their skin, the gender, the nation that they came from, that sort of thing. The other of those 4 matters, gender, religion, race, national origin. The other one is specifically protected by the First Amendment. Freedom of religion. And there's always the one part that gets overemphasized. separation of church and state, which of course is an constitutional statement, but Congress can't make a law establishing religion. Everybody agrees, that's all they ever talk about, but also Congress can't make a law prohibiting the free exercise of religion. And there have been tons of laws prohibiting free exercise of religion, including, to be honest, the Equality Act is one of those laws. But to connect the Equality Act to a law, the Civil Rights Act, that primarily spoke about issues that people are born with, race, gender, national origin, and a fourth one, religion, that's specifically defended in the Constitution, is not the same thing. You can't connect something that has nothing to do with how you were born or a specifically defended First Amendment right. The Equality Act provides civil rights protection based on sexual orientation. And I know that there are those who say that they are born that way. No, there really isn't any proof of that. But people choose their orientation. And then as well, gender identity, that they're a man, but they choose to identify as a woman. That's a choice. It's not how they are born. It's not a First Amendment protected issue. These are choices people make that this right equates with ways that people are born or something that's defended in the Constitution. Individual choices are not the same thing as things you're born with, what you're naturally as. And yet these two acts combined together make that equation. Additionally, it broadens the extent of civil rights protections to public accommodation, which probably was in the Civil Rights Act, I suppose, restaurants, that sort of thing, and shared facilities. Well, what's a shared facility? Be a bathroom, something like that. Again, if you're talking by race, nobody would have an issue with that. Why have a separate bathroom for people of different race? There's no need for that. But when you talk about sharing facilities with a man who thinks he's a woman or identifies as a woman, allowing him to then go into a female restroom, that's what this law is allowing for, shared facilities. We'll look at that a little bit more, but that's what the essence of this act is doing. It's far from the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It's really a immoral end, as I introduced this whole thing with a few minutes ago. But that's what the Equality Act is. And we'll look at more details in a couple minutes. The history of the Equality Act, where did this thing come from? It actually started back in the 1970s. I thought it was, like I said, maybe this Congress and maybe another one before that, but the first Equality Act was introduced in Congress back in the 1970s. Very time-wise, very close in time to the Equal Rights Amendment. As you'll see on page 2. See, this won't take 4 hours. One page done in 10 minutes. It was first introduced in Congress in 1974. And who wants to guess who those two introducers were? Bella's last name, U.S. Congress, Abzug, and then Ed Koch. I didn't know Ed Koch. I didn't remember him being a congressman. I knew him as a mayor of New York City, but he was as well a congressman. So Bella Abzug and Ed Koch were the two congresspersons who introduced the Equality Act, first of all, back in 1974. It didn't go anywhere in 1974. It never really got a hearing, never got voted on. It just kind of died and went away. And it really was gone for about 40 years. But that's the next point. It was not voted on by the full House in 1974. But it's been introduced in the last 4 Congresses. In the year 2015, 2017, 2019, then again this year, this bill was introduced repeatedly. One of the, in fact, I think the guy who's introduced it each of the 4 times, at least 3 of the 4, is a congressman from Rhode Island, Ed Cicilline or something like that. Is that his name? And he's a homosexual, and so he's been pro this thing, and he's been pushing it for the last, at least 6 years now, and probably wanting it before that. This chart gives the progress of this over the last 4 Congresses, last 6+ years. And the reason we're doing this is just to see how it's increasing in acceptance in our, at least in the House of Representatives and the Senate. In the year 2015, there were 178 co-sponsors, and pretty much the co-sponsors, that's pretty much who's going to vote for the bill. Maybe there's some more that join it, maybe some drop out after debate, but for the most part, those who co-sponsored are the ones who are going to fight for it and vote for it eventually. So 178 introduced it or sponsored it in the House and 42 in the Senate, so less than half in each case. And in neither case did it pass the committee. It went to some committee, it just died there, it never passed. Pretty much the same thing happened in the year 2017, although you see the numbers increased. In 2017, 198, so 20 more congressmen in 2017, and 5 more senators in 2017 that supported it that time. Again, it didn't pass committee. It got sent to committees, and both places it died, but there's more support for it. 2019, and by the way, what happened in 2017? President Trump was inaugurated, and this kind of pushed the impetus of it. 2019, 240 congressmen sponsored it. That is a majority. What happened in 2019 was the election in 2018. The House of Representatives switched from a plural or majority Republican Party to majority Democratic Party. And the result, 42 more congresspersons supported this bill in the year 2019, and 1 less in the Senate, 46. In the House, it passed. 236 congressmen and women voted in favor of the Equality Act in the year 2019. 173 opposed it. And it's pretty much, we'll see in a minute, pretty much party line vote. Not exactly, but pretty close to that. The House was controlled by the Democratic Party. The Senate was controlled by the Republican Party. And it didn't pass committee again. It just died in that committee and wasn't heard of again throughout that term of Congress. But now we're in the year 2021, and we not only have Republican-controlled, or pardon me, Democrat-controlled House, good old days I was thinking of, Democrat-controlled House, we have a Democrat-controlled Senate, Democratic-controlled White House. The number of sponsors went down because there's fewer Democratic congresspersons right now, 224, but still a majority, and 48 senators, so not quite a majority, but 48 senators sponsored this bill. It passed the House maybe a month ago now by 224 to 206. So a closer vote, as you can see, compared to 2 years before that, but it doesn't matter. If it passes by 1, it passes. And in the Senate, although there's 48 persons who have co-sponsored it in the Senate, it's a 50-50 tie right now in terms of party makeup. And of course, the Democrat vice president will break a tie if there is one. So it's very close to being passed. All they need to do is have all the Democrats vote for it, and it'll become law. Right now it's in committee, I think the Judiciary Committee, but whatever committee, it's currently in the Senate committee that reviews this and pending a vote. There's one Democratic senator that the Republicans and conservatives are kind of hanging our hopes on in terms of a person. He's from West Virginia. His name is Joe Manchin. And he's a conservative Democrat and has expressed opposition to this. But guess what happened this last week? President Biden nominated Joe Manchin's wife to be on some federal commission. I forgot what it's for. Something that's in the Southeast, a regulatory commission. And it sounds like he's trying to Biden's trying to buy Senator Manchin's vote, not only for this act, but for a lot of things that Manchin is opposing right now. And by appointing his wife, he's hoping to get his support on some things. So although 48 have co-sponsored it, it only takes those other two Democrats to join, and one of them is being kind of bought off, it sounds like. Recent presidents have both supported and opposed it. President Obama supported it back in his term, which ended, of course, in 2016, and it never passed Congress in his time or passed even committee, but he voiced support for it. President Trump opposed it, and it never was presented to him as a bill because the Senate never passed it. But he had said he would veto it if it did get passed. And now President Biden is voicing support for it. And it's again passed the House and is in danger of being passed in the Senate as well in a short time perhaps. You know, like I've been mentioning, political support typically is based on political party. Democratic Party, every yay vote in the first couple votes were completely Democrat. The last couple have included some Republicans. This year, all the Democrats have supported it, and 3 Republicans supported it, and then 8 in the year 2019. So there has been some Republican support for it, but the overwhelming majority of the supporters are in the Democratic Party. And again, right now our Congress is split as close to 50-50 as you can be, especially the Senate, and the House is very close to that. But it's passed the House and could likely pass the Senate in a short time, and if so, it'll become law pending reviews and challenges judicially. So that's the history of the Equality Act and the increasing support of it. Nationwide, if you take polls, you see polls, the polls as they are reported, overwhelming majority support the Equality Act. However, it's never described fully what it's just, are you against discrimination? That's kind of what the question is. Are you pro or against discrimination? And of course, everybody's going to say I'm against discrimination, so they are therefore classified as being in favor of the Equality Act. But if they were to be asked, are you in favor of these specific issues, the majority are against them. But they're just in this bill, and they'll be passed if Congress and the President gets their way. What will happen if it's passed? If the Equality Act is passed in the form it currently is, it can be changed, of course, amendments and that sort of thing. And again, judicial challenges are definitely would come if it gets passed, and so it might get altered somewhat. But if the Equality Act is passed as is currently proposed and written and was passed by the Congress, here are some realistic effects, not just scare tactic warnings, but some real things to expect to happen from it. First of all, the effects on American society as a whole is that privacy and safety will be endangered. Privacy and safety will be endangered. And I hinted at this a few minutes ago. I talked about the bathroom situation. But the bill would allow biological males into the same locker room, restroom, and dressing room as females. So there could be a female in a high school gym finishing gym class or trying out for the girls' basketball team, and in walks a guy and claiming, I identify as a female. I'm a man, but I identify as a female. And he would have the right, by law, to walk into that room where the girls' team is getting dressed and showering and all that sort of thing. Same thing with the restroom, not only in a school, but in a business, Walmart or whatever. public accommodations, dressing rooms. You'd be buying a dress at Kohl's, whatever, and here comes a man into the same area because he's identifying as a female. Privacy and safety endangered. And it's not only a man and an adult woman, but restrooms, dressing rooms especially, and locker rooms could have adult men and minor women. Locker rooms at not only a high school gym, but a gym membership type place, a fitness place or whatever. A man could walk into the girls' locker room. And you can just see this. I mean, the guy who does that maybe has no interest whatsoever in gender identity. He has no idea what that means, but he knows the law and that he's allowed to go in there. And his defense will be very simple. I identify as a woman. If he gets arrested and charged and accused of anything, all he has to do is say, I identify as a woman, and he's fine. Even if he only identified as a woman for 5 minutes and he walked into that locker room, he could still be using this act to defend that immoral behavior. So privacy and safety, especially of females with men coming into areas that should be private and secure for them, that'd be thrown out the window. Here's that page I put on earlier, but down at the bottom, the bill prohibits an individual from being denied access to a shared facility and then defines them: locker room, restroom, locker room, and dressing room. That's in accordance with the individual's gender identity. So that's what the law is, not just some scare tactic that's worst case scenario. That's how Congress itself, or the Congress Research Service, says this bill allows. And they cannot be denied access. Walmart can't put up a sign saying this is a men's bathroom. They have to put up signs saying this is for whoever. A man can walk in a woman can walk into a man's bathroom at Walmart, at the local high school, the local gym, Chase Field, down at the baseball game, wherever. Anything that's public would have to follow this law. So safety and privacy gone. This would be required at places of recreation, exercise, and amusement. So a couple examples of that would be gyms, like I just mentioned, and swimming pools. Places of recreation. So you got most swimming pools, if not all of them, I suppose they all do. They have a changing room, a shower room, and a male this way, female that way, and the man could go that way and just claim to be a female at that time and walk into the changing room of the females at the swimming pool. And again, that's worded into it as well. I have no idea what they mean by exhibitions, but places or establishments that provide exhibitions, recreation, exercise, amusement, gatherings, or displays are covered by this as well. The next point, athletic competition rules will be changed. This is what Dan and Deb were just mentioning, really. Some guy, as a joke, a couple of years before I even really heard of the Equality Act, it's been around, like I said, for years, but some guy as a joke, and he's I don't know, a comedian or something, well known, I'd never heard of him, but he made a little video, I think of like weightlifting, and he lifted up some couple hundred pounds, whatever it is, and it's more than the record for women. And so he submitted his name to Guinness or whoever, and saying he's the strongest female in the world. He's a male, he has no interest in this thing, but he's pointed out how foolish, and he was making fun of it, but how foolish it is to allow a man to compete in a female sport and competition. Biological males would be able to compete against females. Can you imagine a man on a girls' basketball team? I mean, girls can shoot, whatever, there's no conflict there, but imagine how much bulkier, stronger, all he has to do is elbow her and she's knocked out. And and by saying that, some will say, you're being sexist. Well, the reality is that men are stronger. I mean, the average man is stronger than the average woman. He's taller, can run faster, look at any record you want, athletic record, and men run faster, jump higher, whatever, than women do. And if you allow a man to compete in the women's sports, then you're going to knock off some women off the team and have men breaking female records. It's ridiculous. So it gives them an unfair advantage in team and individual sports. Yeah, you mentioned wrestling. Imagine a man, and this happened last year in Iowa, I'm thinking, but a high school boy made the girls' high school wrestling team and got to the state finals. I don't know if he won or not, but he got to the tournament, the state tournament for wrestling. He couldn't have done that in the boys' side, but competing against girls, he was able to defeat everyone in his class. It's sinful, evil, and unfair. But those are things on society. As saved or lost, doesn't matter. This would be equal for Americans, period. But it has another realistic effect on Bible-believing Christians. And this is where it affects each of us, whether we go into a dressing room or locker room or not. This could affect any Christian. The Equality Act prohibits religious beliefs as a defense against compliance. You can't say, well, I'm a Christian, and therefore I'm not going to comply with this and allow this in my business or whatever. That defense is thrown out. You may remember back in 1993, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act was passed, allowing people to defend themselves based on their, you would think with the First Amendment you wouldn't need laws like this, but religious freedoms are being attacked, and so this law was passed by Congress, signed by President Clinton in 1993, and defending people's religious practices. But this is a quote from the law itself, Section 1107. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993 shall not provide a claim concerning or a defense to a claim under a covered title or provide a basis for challenging the application or enforcement of a covered title. In other words, if you are a man, identify as a woman, walk into a room, religion can't be used as a defense against that. Let me change the illustration. You cannot, if you're a Christian who owns a business, you cannot say, well, you can't do that here. If you want to go into the men's or women's dressing room, go to Walmart, but you can't do it in my self-employed store. This law takes away that ability. If you're a Christian owner, you got to allow this bill to be enacted and practiced in your business. The Equality Act applies to places and establishments that provide goods and services. And that's a very broad term, goods and services. Churches, Christian organizations do that. Salvation Army, Christian adoption agencies, all sorts of Christian businesses, ministries, churches, feeding people, whatever. It may ultimately apply to and it's been tried, it hasn't passed yet, but a homosexual couple coming into a pastor's study and say, we want you to marry us. Right now the pastor can say no. If this law passes, goods and services, the pastor probably can't say no. He definitely can as a business. I'm not sure yet as a church, but as a business, you can't say no to that. Again, goods, services, and programs. Churches have programs of different sorts. Even Sunday school in Awana, whatever, could be called a program. And so we would have to follow the Equality Act in implementing guidelines, rules, practices. Boys could walk into the girls' bathroom, that sort of thing, even in a program of a church, technically. Good services or programs. I know it says somewhere in this public, and so some will view, well, that's just allowing Walmart or whatever. But if a church opens its doors and lets the public come in to a program, Awana, for example, then they open the door to this law being enacted against them. Okay, next page. Last page already, how about that? Many believers own businesses. I kind of mentioned this a few minutes ago. And they'd be required to follow this act. So it's not just the corporate world, it's the small business owner would have to practice this as well. I mean, even if somebody owned a small little antique shop, whatever, they would have to follow these rules as well. I can't say, well, I'm a Christian, so it doesn't apply to me. Remember that Christian baker a few years ago that homosexual couple came in, say, we want to get married, bake a cake for us. He said no, go to the one down the street, whatever. Got sued, went all the way to Supreme Court. And he won that case, Supreme Court. They sided with him finally. I mean, imagine the cost of all that to him. But if this law passed, that man would lose. Religion cannot be used as a defense against practicing this. So that's what's coming up. That's the history to it, 50 years ago practically, and the current state of it and the prospect if it does get passed. Okay, what's the biblical response to the Equality Act? How should Christians view this, and how should we react? First of all, believers must not be surprised when evil is promoted in this world. Ephesians 6 actually should be verse 12. That's a typo there. It's not too bad. It took me to page 4 to have a typo. That's better than usual. Let's go ahead and start reading verse number 10, though. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Is there any limit to the evil plans of Satan? We could think, man can't do evil things. There's a limit to them. But our problem is not with man. We wrestle against principalities and powers. We wrestle against Satan. This is satanic activity. And it was just a matter of one group of people versus another group of people. That's one thing. But it's Satan involved in this. We wrestle against him. And there's no limit to what evils he will propagate and advance. So don't be surprised. Look back even 10 years ago, 20. Would you ever expect stuff like you're seeing? I saw today that some rap singer, and I've never heard of this guy, but he's designed a tennis shoe. It's going to be on sale starting tomorrow. A satanic tennis shoe. It has the Nike swoosh on it. I don't know if it's sponsored by Nike or they must be allowing it. But it's black and red. It has a satanic symbol on the tongue of the shoe. It has the verse Luke 10:18, the reference inscribed, Luke 10:18. Jesus says, "Behold, I see Satan fall as lightning from heaven," which to me, Satan's defeated. He's kicked out of heaven. But to them, that's not a bad thing. And Satan's fall from heaven. He's making 666 shoes, no more, but and on each shoe, it's numbered like an artist's, it's 1 out of 666, that sort of thing. So every shoe has the number 666 on it. And on top of that, in the sole of the shoe, there's a drop of human blood in the sole of each shoe. Wicked. What kind of vile person would even think of such a thing? But that's going on sale tomorrow. $1,000 a pair. $1,028, something like that, for a pair of those shoes. And please, don't be surprised at stuff like that. It's not just people, it's Satan involvement, and therefore there's no limit to the wickedness. Many of our politicians have forgotten or never knew two things. 1 Timothy 2, verse 2, one of the biblical duties of government is to allow believers to live peaceable and quiet lives in all godliness and honesty. In other words, leave us alone. Let us live our lives. Let us please the Lord as God leads us. Let us have our own cake-making business or whatever, and not have to follow the rules of the world. But 1 Timothy 2, pray for kings and all that are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty. That's what the Bible says is one of the rules or the requirements of a government. If you ask a common politician, they probably have no idea that that's even in the Bible, and they obviously don't practice that. They've also forgotten Romans 13, which among other things says that politicians are accountable to the Lord. They're not just accountable to the voter, but they are accountable to the Lord. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. God established them, and therefore they are accountable to God, just like a church is, just like a pastors, like a parents are. Whosoever resisteth the power resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. And that's being turned on its head. The rulers are not a terror to the evil anymore. They're a terror to the, well, at least not exclusively. They are as well a terror to good people. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, thou shalt have praise of the same. And the world, the politicians are going against that. They're not praising those who do good things. They're attacking them, making rules to change their practices. He, the politician, is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid. He beareth not the sword in vain. He is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. A person who is a minister of God is accountable to God. I know there's a saying, be subject to them, obey them, etc., but it's also telling the government what to do. Do what God wants. You are a minister of God, not a minister of the people, not a minister of yourself. And they've forgotten that. So politicians either ignore or forget those things, if they ever even knew them. 1 Timothy 2:1, our response is to pray. Pray for our leaders. I mentioned that earlier, a couple minutes ago. Pray for our leaders in government. It looks bad. It looks impossible to change the tide, but nothing's too hard for God to do. And we've seen this in Ezra and Nehemiah a lot in the last couple months studying those books. The heart of the king is in the hand of the Lord. He turns it how he wills. And God can turn the hearts of president or politicians to reject this particular bill and other things as well. But we need to pray to God to do that, for God to do that. Proverbs 17:15. This type of legislative action qualifies as an abomination to the Lord. Let me just read that verse, Proverbs 17:15. He that justifieth the wicked, and he that condemneth the just, even they both are abomination to the Lord. And this bill does both of those. It justifies wickedness. Go ahead, pretend you're female so you can walk into a girl's bathroom and do whatever you want. And it condemns the just. You cannot use religion to defend yourself, and you can't practice your religion as you want because this law forbids that. In both cases, justifying the wicked and condemning the just, politicians endorsing this act are an abomination to God. Acts 5:29, this kind of goes to the question David raised a little bit ago. It's the duty of believers to obey God rather than man whenever there's a conflict between those two authorities. Apostle Peter and the apostles were arrested, they were challenged, they were beaten, several things like that in the opening chapters of the book of Acts. And Peter, verse 29, and the other apostles answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than men. And so keep doing what is right. You may suffer for it. Daniel was told you can't pray, and Daniel still said, I'm going to pray. I don't care. Throw me in the lion's den. So we can't open the doors to this stuff and say, okay, go ahead and do it. We'll just endorse it, turn a blind eye to it, ignore it. Can't do that. We have to obey God. And part of obeying God is upholding righteousness and not endorsing justifying the wicked, as Proverbs 17 termed it. One last verse from Philippians 2, or a couple of verses, but the responsibilities of believers do not change as the world darkens. In fact, if anything, they get enhanced. As the world gets worse, we need to be more strong and more faithful to the Lord. But Philippians 2, do all things without murmurings and disputings, that ye may be blameless and harmless, the sons of God, without rebuke, in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation, among whom ye shine as lights in the world, holding forth the word of life, that I may rejoice in the day of Christ. I have not not run in vain, neither labored in vain. Shine as a light and hold forth the word of life. The wickedness of the world is increasing breakneck speed, pretty much. But our responsibilities don't change. It's not go ahead and accommodate it, turn a blind eye to it, ignore it, live with it. Shine as a light and hold forth the word of light. And many other places the Bible tells us what to do, uphold righteousness and other things. So that's the Equality Act. And again, it's a very prevalent danger right now. And who knows what will happen with the current bill, but if it doesn't pass, you can bet 2 years from now it's going to be introduced once again. Evil never surrenders. They keep pushing and pushing until they get their way.